I'll sit up in my chair, get the good posture going.
Yeah, gotta have it. Yeah, that Disney posture, very important.
I need to demonstrate the, remember the Disney Scoop or whatever it is? I don't know if it's Disney Scoop or Disney Swoop that they taught you at Traditions.
The Disney Scoop, yeah, where you basically stand there, swoop down like you're picking something, yeah. Like you're picking a vegetable or something. Oh, yeah. I remember that.
I thought it was funny that they felt the need to actually tell people how to do that. Like, that's... Right. I'm pretty sure most normal people know how to pick something up off the ground, but I guess not.
Of course. Well, hey, guys. Hey, we didn't see you there. Our bad. We were just talking about this. We were just talking about all things Disney. And, of course, as you know, this is the truth behind the magic. And we're here once again for another video that I hope you guys are definitely eager for, as we have been waiting all week to perform it and get it right, just right for you, the Disney way. Anyway, as you know, or if you're new to the channel, my name is Blaze. I am the one of the hosts here, as well as my good friend Jason, who's also a co-host with me. And this video,
howdy there, folks.
Howdy do. So yeah, we're going to be talking a little bit about this video. We're going to be talking about housing and what it's like to be a part of it, live there, how it's different from when I started back in 2019/2020, early 2020, to Jason's versions of it, which are a little more recent as like a year or two. So with that, we're going to get right into it.
All right. So, as you know, if you've been looking at this, almost certainly, the new housing that they have is called Flamingo Crossings Village. There's technically two complexes, but in all honesty, it's just one complex. There's a road that runs through the middle of it. They're both almost exactly the same. Like, because back in the day, there were 4 complexes, and they were all very different. Significantly different in looks. Room choices were different. The overall niceness of the places was very different. Now it's pretty much just one size fits all. It's, I would say, and I'll probably get into this more later, but it's kind of lost some of, like, its uniqueness. I know we said a couple episodes ago that it really kind of feels like a prison, and it's not all bad. Like, this episode, if some people watch that one, they're probably wondering what we really meant by that. We'll get into that more here, actually explaining why that is and why it's not necessarily all bad. But I guess just kind of start off, I'll just go over some of the basic facts about housing. This is kind of a cop-out, but I will say if you really want to see housing, really look into the details, definitely get on the actual website. But our hope here is really to give you an insight into what it's like living there from a first-person perspective, what it's like now versus what it used to be like, that kind of thing. Because literally anyone can get on here and just list off, oh yes, each one has 20,000 rooms, which that's not true, but anyone can get on here and just list off the facts, but this is the truth. And nothing but the truth, as we've said before.
Right.
So yeah, I'll just list off a few kind of simple facts here. So there's Flamingo Crossings East and Flamingo Crossings West. East is like the main complex. All of your, like, most, if not all, of your first week activities are going to take place there. Traditions, the welcome celebration. I think check-in even takes place there regardless of where you're living. East has the community center plus the, I can't remember the name, the Apprentice Hall. That's where you do, like, traditions and everything. West only has one building like that. It's the community center. East has about 40 buildings, and they're these massive 4-story tall prison block looking buildings. They're not that ugly, but West has a few less than that. I can't remember the exact count. Both have bus stops. You won't have any issues there. You don't have to walk across the street. Back in the day, there actually used to be one complex where you did literally have to walk down the street to another complex to get on the bus. Both have pools and recreation areas. And I would say that's pretty much all I have about the straight facts of the complexes. I'll get into the room details and like the prices in just a minute, but I guess I'll turn it over to Blaze here because he has seen housing. He's seen it from the outside. I'm sure he's seen pictures online of the inside. Well, I know I actually sent him some of my room, but I just kind of want to get his impressions from seeing it when he came down to visit when I was on my program last year.
Oh yeah, and no worries, brother, and I appreciate it. But yeah, so I did, a few times that I did visit Jason while he was on his last program down there. One thing I noticed straight away, like, wow, those fences are high. I mean, they could keep out anyone. I mean, it could be like Jurassic Park and the T-Rex, that thing ain't getting over that fence. Like, those things are incredibly tall. I mean, they'd have to be anywhere from probably 30 to 40 feet tall at least. And it did kind of look like just giant cinder blocks, outside looking in. And there was like almost a compactual or like a security pillbox there that the programmers would go in and go out of to pick up rides and stuff like that. So it definitely had that kind of feel to it, which in contrast to when I did the program back in 2019/2020, it was, actually those apartments like Vista Way, the Commons, those actually felt like, and the other two felt like you were actually in Florida. If nothing else, you felt like you were in a tropical place because they were actual apartment complexes. They were actual, beautiful scenery to walk around in, chill, have a good time. Each one had its own specific charm to it. Like Vista Way was known for like having basketball courts and stuff like that. The Commons was known for having tennis courts and I think even water activities, and I think even like a volleyball court. There were all kinds of things that each facility offered. And if you had classes like that you just signed up for, traditions and stuff like we did in a previous video, that used to be in a whole separate building way far away from housing. That was at Disney University there, Magic Kingdom. So you wouldn't be doing any of that, but if anything else, like if you did like the kind of the open house or first get together, you would go to I believe it was the Commons area, and they had this huge yard there at the complex once you went in, and they had food and games, and you got to learn that you got paid on every Friday, all kinds of stuff. They had little quizzes and prizes and stuff you could win, and it was a way to interact and meet new people, and that was awesome. But yeah, definitely the programs back from when I did it was, again, completely different than what Jason experienced this last time. And, luckily Jason did experience it before and after. And when I was there, and I don't know if Jason remembers, or maybe he had already finished his program, but when I was still there, they were like trying to 50s commercialize the new housing that they were building, which is now Flamingo's Crossing. They're like, oh, it's going to be brand new and everything's going to be real fancy, and you're going to have an electric stovetop and this and that, and everything's all new and modern. And like I say, from the pictures, it's like, some of that's true. Not all of it, but yeah, they definitely, when it first opened, they tried to modernize the crap out of it. Also, it was relatively cheaper for the experience that you got back in 2019/2020 before COVID. So it was definitely a more interesting time to experience. And I will say, and Jason will probably talk about this too, like when I did the program, there were curfews. Like you couldn't have anybody from you. So there were two curfews. There was one for people that just weren't a part of Disney at all. And then there was a curfew for people in the four housing. And the four housing, I think, was like 2 a.m, maybe 1 a.m, something like that. It was that one was pretty late, but the people that weren't associated with Disney was like 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. It was pretty early. So as a result, like we talked about in previous videos, that's why a lot of people are like, well, I can't have a significant other from out of the complexes if they have to go home real early. So that's when a lot of that stuff, when shenanigans and stuff would go on, right up until 2 a.m. And the buses, the bus system there, it depended, because now the bus system, it's like, okay, Flamingo Crossing, it's the same place. But back in the older program, you would have to, depending on which complex you lived in, it would take longer to get back from specific parts. Like if, for example, when I worked at Magic Kingdom, to get home to Vista Way, that was a whole hour, like whole straight hour, because we hit up the 3 other complexes and then we hit up Vista Way last. But on the bright side, if you wanted to go somewhere, Vista Way was kind of the main bus hub. So, you always knew you would have a bus there. Like some buses didn't go to certain complexes and other buses did. It was completely different than it is now, of course. But yeah, it's definitely, some things are better and something, there's always going to be bad stuff. But, overall, I think that, yeah, the chaotic of it was pretty crazy. But I will say, I did like the previous apartment setup, just because you definitely felt more at home. You felt more like it was just an actual apartment versus you're in a cubicle in a pillbox in a in a guarded fenced area. So that's the difference to me. And like I say, Jason, if you have any tips on that, or any things anything you want to add to that, by all means.
Right. Yeah, definitely a lot of good information there. I actually hadn't even thought about the curfews, because they did change that. I guess they just got tired of policing it, but now you can stay overnight as long as you're someone who's in the program, someone that lives at Flamingo. I think they have a thing like it can be no more than like 5 nights in a row or something. They don't police it at all, though. One thing I will say right now is that if you have a problem on your program of any way, shape, or form with your roommates or anything, they do not care at all. Like, your roommate would probably literally have to stab you for them to actually do something about it. Because in one of our previous videos, we were doing our biggest tips, and one that I don't think I said in that was, like, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, whether it be on the job or at housing, like in a roommate situation, because I had a roommate this last year that left his stuff strung out all over the place in the common areas, would use other people's pots and pans and not clean them. He left mine unclean for multiple days in a row. We had a pretty big argument. Like, I was probably a little harsh with the way I confronted him, but I literally said, like, I thought I've done this 3 times. I literally just said, I'm not babysitting anyone. I've done this 3 times. I don't need to do this. So I just straight up told him how it was. Like I said, there was a pretty big blowout. Some pretty hilarious things were said, I might add, some pretty good zingers. But anyway, the long point that I'm making here is that he was an international program person, and I'm from here. I'm from North Carolina. he threatened to have me thrown out of the program, and I just laughed because I know it takes basically going out and shooting someone in the walkway at Flamingo to get thrown out. But my clap back to him was, I'll get you thrown out of the country, and not to get like a debate over any of that started, or any kind of, you know, discussion that might kind of
we get you. No, I get you.
My point is, yeah, like I said, housing will do nothing about it, and especially if you're an international person, even though you pretty much have to do something really horrible for them to take action. Be very careful about what you do as an international participant, because someone like me, I just run the risk of being told, you're getting kicked out. It's a 9-hour drive back home. I can be back in 1 day. If you're an international person, you run the risk of literally being told you have 24 hours to get on a plane, because you're not even allowed in this country anymore.
Right.
But yeah, housing, it's crazy. Really, yeah. I just told that to kind of give an example of
you're good.
The craziness that can occur, and just like I said, stick up for yourself.
Right.
Housing, the people that run it there really just don't care what happens. Back then, they did care a little bit.
Right.
Sorry to cut you off. Like, I'm interrupting you.
You're good. No, I was just gonna say, just, you know, two things. But the first thing, very important point, and I don't think we ever talked about it. But since this is specifically about housing, you can actually, and I don't know if it's changed, but when I did the program, how I met my first roommate was so first, when you get accepted into the program, you're part of a Facebook group, like incoming, you know, Disney college programmers. And from there, they actually would form groups, and those groups would then go to housing and go from there. So that way you actually knew who you were going to be staying with before you got there. And actually, it was a funny thing, because I had befriended somebody, and I actually met my future to-be roommate at the time. But, you know, it seemed kind of sketchy. It almost seemed like a sketchy account. And I'm like, is this even a real person? You know, you're putting a lot of stock in him. It ended up being the person who I originally was talking with. He ended up, you know, for some weird reason, he just was way over the top, doing way too much. Again, he had tried 13 times to get in the program. I think Disney just felt bad for him and finally just let him in. I mean, it was just, you know, sad story. But another thing, too, was it wasn't like, okay, like we talked about in the beginning, he wasn't humble. He was very arrogant going into each time. I think he would even tell people that worked at Disney, like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be part of the program, blah, 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 you know, whether they like it or not. And it's like, I mean, it's good to be confident, but to say it 13 times, yeah, that's pretty arrogant to me. And, so with that, like I say, that's a huge tip that I probably can't stress enough is, if you're going into the program and once you get a part of that Facebook group or whatever, you know, however they set it up now, definitely get to know somebody on there. And then that way, when you do move in, you know a little bit more about them versus you just go there. You have no idea who you're rooming with. You have no idea who they could be. You just could be completely random, et cetera, et cetera. So one thing to do with that is to definitely do that. The second thing is, if you are cool with everybody that you're rooming in with, whether that's one other person or 5 other people, another good thing to do is just to start a kind of room chat. So then that way, like, if you have a question or if something's going on at the apartment, like, hey, you know, a few of us are having a party from this time to this time, you know, is this a problem, you know, or, you know, can we have it or can it just be turned down, stuff like that. So it was just mutual respect there that we were able to get across, and that worked out awesome. Now, one thing I will say about if you are an international programmer is definitely remember that every culture is different. So it might be a little different than yours. Like if you come from a place where, you don't biodegrade certain things, well, in a different culture, it might be completely different where, just biodegrade everything. So there was actually an interesting thing about that. I think poor Jason, he had to deal with that for a little bit.
Well,
Oh boy. So I will say this, again, this might sound super crazy, super funny, however you want to put it, but something to keep in mind. If you do come from a place where you just throw the toilet paper away, the best thing to do is, if that's the case, immediately either get it into the main dumpster as soon as you do it, and like having an own separate bag, or just go ahead and flush it, because there were times where it'd be a few days and it would just stink to high heaven from a certain bathroom, and it was because stuff was not being either flushed or whatever the case may be. And again, I know every culture is different, but it's definitely something that should be addressed. But that's just an example. Another example could be, again, like if you have a party and it goes really late, and for you that's normal, but maybe if someone else, maybe having a party isn't normal, or it's complete, or it's forbidden, or whatever, because it's completely different. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is just make sure that if you are rooming with someone, whether you're an international student or not, the best thing to do is just make sure, hey, these things are okay, these things aren't okay. We never had to deal with it, but I heard of other people, like, they couldn't cuss because certain cultures, definitely forbid cussing and are against cussing. There was other situations like, they couldn't say or do certain things. So just to keep those kinds of things in mind is big. And like I said, we're not saying it's hard to live with people, because it's not. We're just saying, just a word of advice. Just make sure that, again, as you know, everybody's different. That's just how it is. And yeah, just kind of go from there. But that's the beauty about the college program, or at least when Jason and I did it, my first time doing it, was it brought people together from all different cultures and walks of life. And we generally got along with everybody. I mean, there was just maybe one person, or they would do quirky things and we're just like, okay, what are you doing? But yeah, it's definitely just something to truly keep in mind, that you can't have fun. And that was another thing too. We would have fun with everybody, like, I think we talked about, or maybe we didn't, so when Disney was really going on in 2019 and the years prior, like, there's even a whole specific time for Brazilian students to come up and do the program. And I think they even called it like Pablo time or whatever. They had and you could tell they were Brazilian because they always had the parrot, the green parrot, on all the shirts and everything like that. So yeah, and I mean they were everywhere, and that's not a problem. They're not bad people. It was just, you definitely got to experience something completely different that you might not have. And, do they like to party like, they say? Yeah, they do. Do they like to drink? Yeah. I mean, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, they got to experience something that they never would have doing the program, which was Thanksgiving. I'm a pretty good cook, and, Jason can vouch for that. As he's had several of my things before. And one of the things I did was, I'm like, hey, a lot of the guys we have staying with us have never had a Thanksgiving before. Why don't I just go all out on this Thanksgiving dinner? And that's what I did. Had turkey, mashed potatoes, macaroni and cheese, a whole nine. And they loved it. They appreciated it. And it was kind of like, we basically kind of have Thanksgiving every day, because we always, at the end of every day, we bring people together, our neighbors and stuff, and sit down to a big meal and just have a good time. So, you learn something, and it's definitely cool to be a part of. And yeah, I mean, it was something for sure. And like I say, and then the one roommate Jason was talking about in particular, he was from jolly old England, and he probably called him the W word a few times. If I had to guess during that heated argument, that is what it is. But I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, you just have to don't be a snob, and if you're there to have a good time, have fun, and learn, it'll be all right. But if you're trying to do the wrong things, get into a bunch of situations with fornicating or whatever the case may be, or maybe you're drinking too much or whatever the case may be, or even gambling or doing whatever stuff you probably shouldn't, then you're probably not going to have that good of a time. But if you're just there, have a good time occasionally, hang out with your roommates, get to know them, get to experience a different culture, whether it's region of the U.S., other parts of the world, etc. Definitely awesome and a cool experience to do. Another thing that we would recommend doing, and you don't have to, but it's how Jason and I kind of bonded, and it's how we got other people to bond too, was either playing music or listening to it or singing along to it. It doesn't have to be Disney. If you get Disney, I don't want to hear another Disney, that's fine. We get it. We completely understand. It does not have to be Disney related. It can just be a song from your country that you like, or maybe it's a pop song or whatever. Just something that you can relate to with your roommates and kind of be an icebreaker too is an awesome way to hang out and get to know people for sure. Now, Jason, I know you had a little more info about what musical instruments you can play, can't play, stuff like that.
Right. So for the most part, instruments they're not really a big fan of. I would say your best bet is going to be a keyboard. Just bring a small keyboard or something like that, because it's so easy to get sounds on your computer now. Maybe bring a little Bluetooth speaker or something so you can use it if need be, because I've done that. I've taken a guitar down every time, and the first time I just had a little effects processor thing and a small Bluetooth speaker. The last two times, or maybe it was just the last time, I just used my computer and had the sounds on there. I don't think I ever got the chance to actually play it out loud on that program, but yeah, guitars are fine. Acoustic guitars, electric guitars. I mean, if you're playing it at 3 a.m. or something, an acoustic guitar, that's obviously not good, but stuff like brass instruments, woodwinds, amplified instruments, although you can pretty much get around that when they say amplified, because a Bluetooth speaker technically isn't an amplifier, but that kind of thing they really don't like. I've seen people asking on the Facebook groups where can I play my trumpet or whatever, and some people have said there might be a room in the community hall, but I don't think there is. Even if there is, that's not really going to give you much of a chance to play it.
I mean, right. I mean, I would just real quick, I would say if you have a saxophone, clarinet, something like that, I mean, the whole new ride or whatever that the Princess and the Frog ride or whatever that they're coming out with at Magic Kingdom. Well, one of the characters plays the trumpet, but they do it outside. So I guess if you did it outside and it wasn't too obnoxious, if you knew what you were doing, if you're just just playing random notes, then they're probably gonna be I probably shouldn't do that. But if you're playing actual songs and people like it or something like that, then yeah, that's probably fine. So if it were me and I had my trombone or my saxophone or whatever the case may be, I would just find a spot outside or like an open area or something like that where I could play it, and that way I'm not bothering anybody. And I would do it before like it got real late, like probably no later than 8 or 9 o'clock, because then usually people are getting off work or finishing up what their shifts and stuff. And so I probably wouldn't play it then, but yeah, any time between, if you have a day off, then probably a good time to play it. Just not real early in the morning. Don't try to do Reveille. Wake everybody up. They will find you. Because it's not like before where it's like, oh, you could go to one complex, do it real quick, and then hop on a bus and hide in another complex, and they don't know where you're at. No, you can't do that now. This is just one specific. It's one big place, so you can't really get away with that now. So yeah, definitely, if you're gonna play those kinds of instruments, just probably best to do it outside, because if the worst thing you want to have happen is your room, maybe not your roommates, but maybe your roommates plus your neighbors are like, hey, he's playing something, or they're playing something real loud and are trying to focus, or whatever the case may be. So just a little rule of thumb there.
Definitely. And yeah, I would say if you're outside, they probably wouldn't say anything to you if you're playing a trumpet. I don't know if it's technically against the rules, but people are out there with speakers playing, 120 decibels or whatever all the time, and they apparently don't care. So I would say if you're out there with an instrument and you're actually playing well, nothing is going to happen to you. And a couple of comments on the cultural differences as well, because that was something I was kind of thinking about when I was thinking about making this video. Nowadays, the international program is not as big of a deal. Blaze kind of said some stuff about that, about the Brazilians. Like, they had a time when they would try to all come down. It was like considered like a rite of passage for them. Like he said, I think they even had a specific name for the program or something. I can't remember what it was, but it's not as big of a thing now. It's slowly coming back. I don't think it'll ever be as big of a thing as it once was. I think Epcot, they'll always try to keep international people in for obvious reasons. And the program will still be around, but I think it's a lot more work for them to get international people in the country and set up to work, getting them their money correctly. I think it's a lot more work. Back in the day, in fact, one of the complexes was considered like the international complex. I think it was Patterson Court. Like, yep. They each had their nicknames. Patterson Court was the international complex. Vista Way was like the party complex, or just the ancient complex, the classic one. Chatham Square, I think, was the one they called the retirement home. I don't even really know why. Maybe just because it looked like that. Yeah. And the Commons was like the rich people complex. It was always the nicest one. Not that rich people lived there necessarily, but it was considered like the rich complex.
I think Patterson Court was called the senior citizen one because that's where a lot of the older programmers stayed. Now, when we mean older, we mean like older, like in their 30s and 40s. We're talking old. So I think that's where they had their own specific complex, and it was just Patterson Court. So yeah, and in fact, if I remember right, most of the time when we went to Patterson Court and picked people up from the bus stop there, they were, a little older. So they're not going to be like college age, like in their 20s. They're going to be like in their 30s, 40s. I even think I met somebody in their 60s doing the program. So, I mean, that's just to put it in perspective, that, yeah, the program was, it's getting it probably back there, but yeah, way different. It is.
Yeah, that does sound correct. I believe Patterson Court was the senior citizens one. Maybe it was Chatham Square that was the international one, but it also may have been Patterson Court that was both, because that may have been the one that was like for the older people and the international people. Of course, you'd see the international people everywhere, because we, of course, had them at Vista Way. But Yeah, Patterson Court, I don't think I ever knew anyone who lived there, so that makes sense that it would be kind of the outlier kind of one. But yeah, cultural stuff, you can deal with most of the differences just on like the first day with an easy conversation. Like we were talking about the used toilet paper in the trash can, that kind of thing. That got dealt with literally in like one day because we had a roommate, interesting guy. I'll just leave it at that. That kind of confronted the guy and asked him if he would stop doing that. So, but then once there were some room changes and things happened and ended up being all international people on one bathroom, it went back to the other way. But that's kind of a digression. Me and Blaze, we had our own bathroom, so it didn't matter. But I think the only time you'll run into real cultural issues, and I don't mean this in like any, I don't know what word they would use, xenophobic way or something. It's just the simple truth that you learn from living in this environment for many months, is that there are certain cultures, and not like a blanket statement, but certain groups, subgroups of cultures that just don't really have a mutual respect for other people, especially if you're outside their group. There are definitely groups of people, like subgroups, like I said, that you can tell they will look down on you for being American, but just look the other way. Like I said, as long as you're not having to live with someone like that, you'll be totally fine. As long as both people are respectful and have a mutual agreement amongst each other, it'll be totally fine. So typically you will not have an issue with that.
I mean, the best way for me to describe it was, and it will probably get back to this, but back when I did it, it was kind of almost like the UN of the United Nations of college programs. Like, it was like everybody. So the best thing to do that I could give advice on for it is just, not only might you be representing yourself and your community or something like that, in some cases you might be representing your country, and you don't want to, if someone's from, let's say, France and they're visiting America for the first time, you don't want to fit those stereotypes that Americans are rude and disrespectful and stuff like that. You want to make sure that they have a nice thought. So when they go back home, like, hey, that thing about Americans being rude, it's actually not true. Because I met with Blaze and he was very nice and helped me out a lot. So, I mean, it's just stuff like that you want to make sure that you're doing that can help not only you, but also, give a representation or a better light of, where you're coming from. That's like a huge thing that you can definitely do to help yourself out, whether you're from the States or internationally. Definitely a huge thing. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I think we'll come around to kind of talking about the different room types and the prices. We'll kind of get into that. So I have a list here. I was just looking up like the latest room chart and that kind of thing. So shockingly, and honestly it is kind of shocking, the cheapest room type, which is the 2x2, well, I'll just go over the room types first. There's a 2x2, which is 2 rooms, but each room has 2 people in it. So, you feel like you're a toddler and you're at a sleepover or something, because apparently that's what they think of us. But those are the majority of the rooms. That nowadays is $202 a week. That has reached the $200 limit. Even when I had it last program, I don't think it had reached that much yet, and that's been less than a year ago. So it's going up. There's the 4x2, which is you get your own room, but you share a bathroom. I didn't see an exact price for those, but I'm sure it's right in the middle between the 2x2 and the highest one, which is the 4x4, which is your own room, own bathroom. which is $246 a week. So you're basically talking $1,000 a month. The rooms are pretty tiny in the single rooms, especially. But it's definitely a different experience when you get your own bedroom. You are simply put most likely to get put in a shared room. But if you have a good roommate, it is a better experience than just having your own room. And I would say it's very much likely that you will have a good roommate experience. Like, it is possible to have a bad one, as has been demonstrated during the course of this video, but it is not that likely. Now, back in the day when we did it the first time, it was like advantageous to try to get the cheapest room type.
Yep.
Because you definitely did make more money. But with how it is now, I feel like it's not even that great of a benefit between the cheapest and the most expensive room type. I mean, it's a couple $100 a month, but it's not like, I think back in the day it was like a difference of like, I don't know, it was more than that between the cheapest and the most expensive.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was a significant difference in the paycheck.
Yeah, like I think if now this is back in the day, it was like you could have your own room, your own apartment just by yourself, or you could do like Jason and I did, which was, I guess, would be the equivalent now of the 4x4. So they were, I guess it was 4x2.
It was the equivalent of the 2x2.
Yeah,
it technically would have been 3x2 because it was three rooms with two people.
Right. So yeah. So we had so 6 people total. So yeah, and the 2 rooms shared a bathroom. The 1 room had its own bathroom. So that was nice. But yeah, it was completely different. Yeah. So and that was like one of the cheaper ones, and that was like I think 100 to 150 a week.
Yeah, it was 111 a week. I remember exactly. It was 111.
Yeah, so it was about so it was that much a week. But then like if you wanted your own apartment, so like single, you're not, no other roommates, no nothing, I think it was like 350 a week or something like that. It was pretty high up there. Now those were very rare, and I think those were even taken by people who were in their 30s and 40s. They were not taken by, I did not know a single person that was either going to college or who had just graduated that was their situation, where they were just rooming by themselves and no one else. Like that'd be extremely rare. So most of the time that's who those were for. But yeah, those averaged anywhere from, I think, 300 to about 400 a week. So they were pretty pricey. And if you're like, well, that would have been a lot, blah blah blah, well, it's true, it is, but have no fear, Disney would make sure that you could pay it by working you like crazy. Like, it was not out of the ordinary to work a 60, 70, 80-hour work week at the most, I think, is how much I ever worked in a week. And the difference was, and I still don't think it's this way now, but when I did the program, even though all that was a bunch of overtime, they hated giving it out. So they really crunched your overtime by a ton. Because normally, like your 90-hour work week, man, that's a fortune. Well, it would be, but Disney finds a way to make sure that you don't have a fortune, and basically whatever your rent is, your paycheck is essentially just cut in half. So instead of making that $800 a week or the $1,000, however much, you're basically making half that. So you're left with about 400, maybe 500 if you're lucky. And that was back then. Now, I don't know what it would be like, but since rent and parking permits and everything have gone up, you're probably just making maybe, after all the deductions and stuff, maybe 300 a week, maybe. maybe 350. This is just a rough estimate. I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, so I actually did some calculations for our video that we're going to be doing soon. That's our budgeting video, like the budgeting and finances. And I did look at how much money you would be bringing in if you had the most expensive room type. So per week, this is what I came up with. So assuming it's $16 an hour, which I don't see it going up anytime soon. I don't even think they wanted to go up that high, but they kind of had to with just how the world was going.
Yeah.
If you're working 30 hours, you'll only be bringing in $234 a week. And that's not taking into account the taxes or other deductions that they pull out of the paycheck. It's going to end up being less than 200. If you work 40 hours, you're getting $394 a week. But once again, it'll be a little bit lower than that. So it's a big difference in those 10 hours, because once you reach the threshold where you've paid back your housing, it's pretty much just free game after that. And it takes about 2 days of your work week, regardless of how many you're working, to pay the housing. So if you're only getting scheduled 4 days a week, which I was last program, you really don't make any money. I actually lost money on that program. It was kind of because of my own personal choices, which I'll talk about that in the budgeting video, but it does not leave you with much. And I think in 2019, my paychecks were only like $150 a week, but a dollar went a lot further.
Yeah.
That far back. Like, even though that was only 5 years ago, it went a lot further.
Yeah.
And I actually I just looked up kind of a fun fact. I looked up the old housing chart from 2019. The cheapest room option was $109, which is what we had. Although I think by the time I got there, I think it went up a couple bucks.
Yeah. So did
and
the
most expensive was $196. And it was a 1-bedroom, 2-person, so you didn't even get your own bedroom. But a $90 difference in 2019 was a big deal. Mm-hmm. Like, you were talking, if you got the most expensive room back then, they were pretty much paying as much as the people are paying now for the cheapest room. And
right. And
it was pretty rough back then. I honestly don't even know how they really made it paying that much for a room in 2019, but
right.
Just a fun fact.
Right, and I was just going to add on to it. Yeah, you also have to remember back then, we weren't getting paid no $16 a week. If we were getting paid $16 a week, man, yeah, we probably would. Jason and I would have been like, hey, let's go do our own room thing. And,
we would have been rich.
Yeah, it would have been rich, no problem. But no, back then, you're getting paid barely above minimum wage, which was like at the time $8. So you were not getting paid much. I mean, it was not like you were, again, like Jason said, you were maybe you were taking home $250 a week. And if you went out every week, or, whatever the case may be, that adds up. And you're basically, if you're not careful, you're living paycheck to paycheck. But we'll talk that more in the next video. But yeah, definitely just something to keep in mind with housing. Back then it was more affordable to do the most roommates you can option. Nowadays, I guess it doesn't really matter. And again, completely different feeling wise. Another thing back then, like with the pools, back in the day, each specific complex had its own pool, and they were all unique. They weren't all the same layout. They were completely different. I think the best one was the Commons, of course, because it was the newer one of the 4, but it had an incredible pool, and I would hang out with people there. Vista Ways was kind of like the equivalent of like a cheap motel's pool. It was not big. There was not much to it. And it was just kind of out in the open versus the other ones that were more kind of hidden. This one was just out, right? Like, literally, bus could be pulling up and there's the pool. I mean, there was no real, like, if you were thinking, oh, I'll take a private dip or whatever. Nope, don't do that. you were on display. And also, like another thing we haven't talked about, like the love bug seasons. Like literally, there are these bugs in Florida called love bugs, and they are just everywhere. Certain parts of the year, and that would also be not a good time to go to a pool or anything like that because again, they are everywhere. They don't bite, I don't think. I don't remember ever getting bitten by one. They're just annoying to deal with because they're just like they can get in your face and all that, like because they're intertwined with each other and all that. That's why they're called love bugs. And yeah, they're just like as Jason probably knows better than anybody other than me. They can be annoying.
Yeah, the wildlife in Florida in general can be a big shock to some people who are not from the area, that's for sure.
Right.
But yeah, just to kind of comment on one of the last things. Yeah, we were making $11 an hour, or at least I was in 2019. Now they make 16, which you might think that actually sounds like pretty good money compared to back then. It's not. Like, it feels like you're making less now than you did in 2019. And that was kind of something I had on my notes for this video, was that even though you make more, the cost of the rooms has effectively doubled in price.
Yeah.
It does not even out when you take into account how much food costs, and we will have an actual video about budgeting and the finances and that kind of thing.
Right.
I guess kind of the last kind of topic that I'll kind of just breeze through here is just kind of a few comparisons between the old and the new housing. We've already talked about quite a bit of it just in conversation, but I would say, sorry, I'm getting a text here. It's making noises. Just overall, it has a much bigger feeling now, and I know we've said that. It doesn't really feel like an apartment complex. It just doesn't feel as much like home, I would say. I mean, you don't really feel like you're at home, but everything's bigger. The walkways, the buildings, the insides of buildings. Like, it's kind of imposing when you roll up to that place for the first time. On the flip side, even though it does kind of have that prison feeling, it's much nicer. The rooms themselves are like, I literally said it was like a penthouse compared to Vista Way, and honestly, it is. Like, if you get your own room, especially, it feels very nice, but you do pay for that. Like, just simply put, you will pay for that. Yeah, kind of tying into just to it being larger, the old complexes felt more like a tight-knit community. Like, you would see people walking around that you knew. You can see that at Flamingo, but it's not quite the same. You know, it's like a 10-minute walk to the bus stop for some people at Flamingo. If something happened at one of the old complexes, you would hear about it, like, almost immediately. Because word just spread like wildfire there, and it was so small. If you didn't literally hear it going on, you would hear about it.
Right.
And people used to be proud of their complexes. That's another thing. I don't think anyone's proud to live at Flamingo. And I know it hasn't been around long enough to really get like any notoriety. But, you know, people would have debates over Vista Way, Chatham Square, which one was better, that kind of thing. The Commons people just felt like they were better, some of them, because it was the nicest complex. There was a real rivalry, and it was really a part of the program getting to live at those places. So yeah, I guess my final word, if I could just put it overall, well, I would say I would suggest living at housing. You can choose to live off campus, but I would honestly caution against it unless you know for a fact you are going to be staying there after your program, because it is not that simple to get an apartment, especially just for a few months or whatever. I'm actually kind of going through that now because I'm looking at apartments in Orlando right now. Of course, it'll be on a more long-term basis, but Yeah, so definitely the new complex is nicer, has more amenities, has more recreation. The bus stop's better, the bus service tends to be better, but it just lacks the feeling of the old complexes. Those places were truly legendary. And of course, the new places cost more as well. But I guess that would pretty much be my final word on it. Would still be, I would suggest living there as opposed to living off-site. And I don't know if you have any final words to add on the subject, but go ahead.
Oh, we gotcha. Yeah, I would just say, yeah, definitely. The newer one does look nicer. It does seem, well, a bit more put together than the other one. I don't know. Just for me, the older one just felt like, if you were, it kind of just felt like you were on vacation with the apartments, how they were set up, everything, just how they looked and the feel of them. But yeah, they definitely did have problems of their own. Like, I think some even would have geysers, which were water pipes would just burst and you could just see them. Like, there would be videos of them when we did the program of just these like 20, 15, 20-foot high, just water just continuing to spew out because a water main had burst or something like that. But yeah, it was just one of those things that, it kind of made you tough. Now, I will say, we lived on the third floor, versus I don't know what the first floor would be like. Now with carrying groceries, obviously first floor way better, but like, stuff like if you wanted to kind of have your own space and not have to worry about somebody being above you or something like that, then yeah, definitely if you can get the top floor, that is something I would recommend because it definitely made things a lot easier. And they were a bit more spread out. Like, yeah, you had to deal with neighbors, but you didn't have to deal with, you only had to deal with one neighbor, right? One next to you and then one below you versus, if you were on a lower floor, or I don't know how the diagram's set up for them now, but you might have to deal with multiple people. You might have situations above, left, right, and below. I mean, that. So definitely you might have to deal with a lot more, people being like, hey, keep it down, or, or hear something, or you might be the one telling them to keep it down, whether they're partying or whatever. So just one of those things to keep in mind. And, in fact, yeah, I would say that I did have a lot of fun. It was kind of wild because, yeah, when I would watch sports stuff or when we would do sports stuff, we wouldn't necessarily yell real loud, but, we might get a little shouty, but, we didn't have anybody like, hey, keep it down, blah, 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 we're trying to sleep. Like that never happened. So that was nice. But yeah, definitely with housing, you learn about yourself. Definitely get you out of your comfort zone. You definitely get to meet people and new experiences. And I don't know if it's set up like this now, but back when we did the program together, it was like the guys. You might be each building, like there might be guy, room full of, or apartment full of guys one side, and then adjacent would be a apartment full of girls on the other side. Now I don't know if Disney was like kind of like, oh, this way you can hang out with everybody like that. I don't know, but again, I don't know if the program's like that now or if that's changed or if you can have a girl roommate and you're a guy or vice versa. I have no idea, but when I did the program, they were separated, obviously, and but they might be right across the thing or just a floor below or whatever the case.
Right. So yeah, now you can opt into like gender neutral housing, but it's a pretty unusual thing. It still is, for the most part, just male and female apartments, but yeah, I think the layout is pretty much just random though. Like, I don't think there's any real rhyme or reason to which apartment is which. There aren't certain buildings for each thing and that kind of thing. So yeah, I guess that'll do it for this video. I certainly hope we've helped you in kind of grasping what housing is like, what it's like living there. At least feel good about the fact that it is significantly nicer than it used to be, even if there are some downsides. And you'll get through it if you just kind of take it all in stride, just go with the flow. Like I said, we'll be doing a video soon about budgeting. Hopefully that can help some people with literally making it through the program without having to leave. But yeah, housing, it's not terrible. You will have a good time there as long as you just, like I said, go with the flow. Hopefully you'll get good roommates, but other than that, it should be good. And yeah, I guess that's all we have for you in this episode. So we will see you next time.
Alrighty, guys. See you next. Bye. Have a beautiful time.